Hey you guys, it's Marciano, your vet tech. Gonna go over top 10 ways to avoid unnecessary vet visits. First one I want to talk about is something that's pretty simple, basic nail trimming. Once you get that down, you can avoid your pet having unnecessary pain, going to the vet for no reason, just because their nails grown into their pad. I've seen that quite a few times, and it's not necessarily like the owner like being neglectful or anything like that. It just goes missed very easily, and the pet doesn't complain until it's like an infection, and then you're spending hundreds of dollars later. Next thing I want to talk about is keeping them secure and keeping them in the yard. A lot of times, people keep the gate open, keep a window open if they have cats, and somebody will do something outside where there's loud noises involved, whether it's construction or a car backfiring or something. I lost a cat once as a kid when there was fireworks going off on the 4th of July. Our window was open and the cat just jumped right out the window and never came back again. So that's something to keep in mind, just securing the perimeters, just to make sure they're not going to get out unnecessarily and cause a problem or get hurt. And then you're out a lot of money and your pet's going through a lot of pain for it. Don't feed human food if you can avoid it. Feeding human food can cause problems that you don't want for your pet, including cleaning up messes and that you already know what's involved with that. Working on training's another one. If we can teach our pet basically the do's and don'ts of the house, then they can avoid a lot of things. And if you're an outdoors type person, snake aversion training is one to look into, because if your pet just goes up to a rattlesnake, gets bit, then they're gonna be in the ER for a while, and you're gonna be out a lot of money. Listening to your vet's recommendations is a very important thing. Just like when you go to the vet, just like when you go to the vet for yourself, just like when you go to the doctor for yourself, they're gonna give you recommendations, whether it's blood work, things like that. If you can't afford to do everything at once, that's fine. The veterinarian isn't looking for you to spend thousands of dollars in a day or hundreds of dollars in a day. What they're looking for is that you can focus on the important things that your pet needs, and then we could do it piecemeal, step by step. And that way you don't have to shell out hundreds of dollars at once, and you can plan it out. Just ask your veterinarian, what's the best way? I can only afford to do the most important things first. And they'll say, oh yeah, we'll go ahead and set up a plan, and then you can follow it, and then that way it can be not only cost effective, but effective for your pet's health care. Grooming is one that we tend to kind of glaze over a lot. Pets with long hair tend to need to be groomed, or at least the owner needs to learn how to groom at home. You don't have to be very fancy with this. This is basically just keeping them clean, keeping mats from building up onto their coat, causing unnecessary irritation to the skin because it's pulling the skin, and also causing them to itch, thus breaking the skin, and then causing infection later. And then they're going to be at the hospital getting what's called a hot spot, which we'll talk about that later, which is a bacterial skin infection. You're going to be paying for treatment of that and antibiotics. That's not cheap, so you guys want to keep that in mind. Yearly vet visits, staying on top of a yearly vet visit, that way you get the best recommendations every year for your pet. And they'll talk to you about things about blood work, things about parasite screening, checking for at worms, which we'll go over certain worm-like parasites later on in the channel. We'll talk about ways to avoid it and ways to stay on top of your pet's health as far as that goes, and we're not then transferring parasites to ourselves, which we'll talk about which parasites we could be susceptible to, and then we'll talk about that later also. Flea control, staying on top of flea control is another one that can be missed, not just because it's not thought about, but just because our lives get busy and we tend to forget about it, and we could have the medicine right on the shelf and not give it, and then your pet gets a flea infestation. Sometimes they can get a flea allergy, which we'll talk about later, and they could end up in the hospital for that, and time, money, and medication for the pet. Vaccines, you want to stay on top of vaccines. That's the last one. A lot of times we'll just kind of, they could just get the puppy or kitten vaccines and we're done, right? It does not necessarily work like that in animals. You want to do it yearly, because just like with humans, you're going to have mutations in certain viral disease and things like that. So you want to stay on top of that, and make sure they're getting vaccinated yearly. Now, if some pets are susceptible to vaccine reactions, then your veterinarian will guide you on how to stay on top of that to where we can avoid that, and then we'll keep them healthy. But thanks for stopping in. I forgot one other tip. Last one, that was more like 9. Last tip is picking up after yourself. Whatever it is, medication, stuff like that, just make sure you scan the floor at least once you're done working on something, because you could miss something. And we've done a lot of surgeries on taking things out of pets that could be avoided. All right, other than that, that was the last thing. See you on the next video.